This is 7th Generation Warfare. I am your current host, John Nelson, and in this episode, we'll be continuing to look at Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication number 1, Warfighting. We are still in the chapter number 1, The Nature of War, and we will be looking at the subsection on friction. So let's get into it. Friction. Portrayed as a clash between two opposing wills, war appears a simple enterprise. In practice, the conduct of war becomes extremely difficult because of the countless factors that impinge on it. These factors collectively have been called friction, which Clausewitz described as, quote, the force that makes the apparently easy so difficult, end quote. Friction is the force that resists all action, and saps energy. It makes the simple difficult and the difficult seemingly impossible. So first, the book's going to reference Clausewitz a lot. He was a German war strategist and was very instrumental, I believe, in designing blitzkrieg for the German army in World War II. It's been a while since I've gone over this stuff, so my history could be a little off. But that's who he was, and if you know what blitzkrieg is, that was what made the German army so very effective in the early years of World War II, taking countries like Poland in just like 2 weeks or whatever. So friction, just like sandpaper on a piece of wood, it takes a lot of force to push it across, or even more so a wood plane, to actually shave off the wood. It's going to take a lot of force. It's not just sliding a piece of glass, like a bowling ball down a bowling alley. There's not a whole lot of friction there. So it's kind of that same concept. And although war seems simple as two opposing wills, or just like an image of two guys wrestling, there's a lot of dynamics at work that go into even a wrestling match, where every slight movement of the other person's body gives you a hint that you need to change your own positioning. But in war, the battlefield is, I don't even know how many dimensions. There's obviously space and time, but you're dealing with the dimensionality of hundreds or thousands or millions of people's will, involved in that. So all those things together, in things like weather, in traditional warfighting, weather, you get so focused on fighting the enemy, you forget that the weather came and flooded out the field. You were going to send your machine, your tanks across, and now your tanks can't get to the front and meet up with the infantry, and your infantry is unprotected or something. All those things. So the simple becomes difficult, and the difficult becomes impossible. The very essence of war, as a clash between opposed wills, creates friction. In this dynamic environment of interacting forces, friction abounds. So just reiterating. Friction may be mental, as in indecision over the course of action. It may be physical, as in effective enemy fire or terrain obstacle that must be overcome. Friction may be external, imposed by enemy action, the terrain, weather, or mere chance. Friction may be self-induced, caused by such factors as lack of clarity of defined goals. That's a big one. Lack of coordination, unclear or complicated plans, complex task organizations, or command relationships, or complicated technologies. Whatever form it takes, because war is a human enterprise, friction will always have a psychological as well as physical impact. And also I mean, humans are fallible creatures. We tend to make mistakes. So that's wasn't necessarily put in there, but humans just are not reliable. So that's another one. But I like how it started off with mental indecision in course of action. That's very common in parenting, because there's so many ways you could treat or interact with your children. You can certainly get bogged down or overwhelmed by how your actions are going to impact the development of your children. So that's friction. So as you're going into your 7th generation warfare, the last thing you want is to be implementing friction of your own creating into your warfare. There's going to be plenty of friction, how the community is interacting with your kid, what media that they might be getting exposed to when not under your supervision, and all these other things will cause friction in that development and that procurement of your child's will. You don't want to be throwing in your own. Lack of clearly defined goals. That's also goes right to that same point. Is hopefully you're coming to 7th generation warfare before or while your children are still young, so that you can really develop those goals, understand what it means to protect their will, and go for it, and build your decisions with that framework. But people are there's going to be intermediary goals along the way that you're going to have to establish, for instance, education. Like, what is the goal of the education? And your goal for education might shift when you see what your children's natural abilities are. So you might think that you got to teach them, the basics, but then maybe, as is the case with my oldest child, appears to be very engineer minded, so I might try to redirect his education more towards engineering, more towards engineering. So clearly defined goals. Lack of coordination. Big one would be lack of coordination with your spouse, but also certainly if you had your children being watched by other people, be it a grandma and grandpa daycare or an actual daycare or going to public school, anything like that, lack of coordination over the intent of how you want your children to be raised, that's going to cause friction. It's going to, and that friction will cause problems. So being on top of that. Unclear or complicated plans, goes the same way. Make sure you understand what you're doing with parenting and are communicating it effectively to those who need to know. Task organization, you could apply that to family and command relationships. And complicated technologies. I don't think we can fully appreciate or understand how technology, and by technology I'm mostly referring to screens and the internet, I don't think we can fully appreciate how that's impacting our children. So me personally, I reduce it as much as possible. My children will be behind their peers in exposure to many of the things that their peers are exposed to, but I don't think it'll greatly affect them. But that's something that you're going to have to decide on your own. All right, so we'll get back into it. While we should attempt to minimize self-induced friction, like I said, the greater requirement is to fight effectively despite the existence of friction. One essential means to overcome friction is the will. We prevail over friction through persistent strength of mind and spirit. This is good stuff. While striving ourselves to overcome the effects of friction, we must attempt at the same time to raise our enemy's friction to the level that weakens his ability to fight. So, yeah, there is going to be friction. You're going to not know what the best course of action is. You got to have the mental and spiritual strength to just say, "F it, I'm going ahead. This is the plan I'm setting in place. I'm going for it. Nothing's going to stop me until, reasonable evidence comes to suggest another course of action." And with parenting, though, or with seventh generation warfare, as long as you understand that there could come a time where the decisions you made in parenting your children, they might grow up to resent those decisions, and they have the right to resent the decisions you made in parenting them, then, and you're willing to own up and apologize to them as their adult selves for the decisions you made, I think it offers you a great amount of freedom in making decisions. Don't take it personally if, when they get older, using their informed self, their informed reason, and with their own will intact, disagree with how you parented them. That's a learning opportunity for a future generation of seventh generation warfare. It's not called two generation warfare. It's not, I'm raising my kid to protect their will, and then they're going to tell me everything I did wrong, and then it's going to die there. They and you together can then work that issue out and bring it to the third generation, which would be your grandchild, and so on and so forth. It will just continue. It will snowball. And together, as the generations go by, you will be developing better and better processes for securing the will of your descendants. So don't get too hung up. It's not all on your shoulders. It's a multi-generational fight. I do like the part about getting your enemy's friction to the level that it weakens their ability to fight. And seventh generation, sixth generation warfare tend to be more on self-work, but certainly there can be influences that are people, and they might need to be dealt with in some way or another. And just confusing the hell out of people who are trying to manipulate you is a good way of doing that. So, back to it. We can readily identify countless examples of friction, but until we have experienced it ourselves, we cannot hope to appreciate it fully. Only through experience can we come to appreciate the force of will necessary to overcome friction and to develop the realistic appreciation for what is possible in war and what is not. While training should attempt to approximate the conditions of war, we must realize it can never fully duplicate the level of friction in real combat. So right there at the beginning about identifying the countless examples of friction, you're not going to, and even you and your child combined won't understand all the friction of parenting, and that's why this is a multi-generational fight. And not to get hung up too much of it on yourself. But yeah, it says training should approximate war. There is no training in seventh generation warfare. We're just going for it. It's every day. Every day is combat, non-violent combat. You're in it. You're not training for a big day. Your life, the actions you make as a parent, are shaping your descendants and will have an effect on the ability of them to exercise their will. So don't think tomorrow I'll do X or tomorrow I'll do Y. It's today. And don't let the friction, the next chapter we're going to talk about is uncertainty. Don't let the uncertainty and the friction withhold you from just doing it. Do it. So that was friction, still in chapter 1 of Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 1, Warfighting. Next episode will be on uncertainty. I hope you are enjoying this series. Please like, subscribe, and share.